People are always asking us, what can I plant this time of year? What can I plant in late fall, early winter that will do okay and grow throughout the winter? So today we're going to plant some all-top turnips, some tatsoi greens, and some Mizuna greens on elevated beds. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and that bell button down below so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. If you're a frequent viewer of our channel, it's always good to have you back. So this here is the plot where we had our sweet potatoes planted earlier this year, and I showed you on our previous video our sweet potato harvest. Now this plot's probably about 20 feet wide and I'd say 30 to 35 foot long. And since we dug the sweet potatoes, we came in here and cleaned this plot up because we knew we were going to be planting some greens here. So we got all those vines out of there, got all those little pieces of sweet potato that we missed when we were digging it, and took the tiller in here just to kind of level it out again. It was pretty chunky and uneven after digging those sweet potatoes, so we got it nice and leveled out so we can plant some greens here. So today we're going to be making some elevated beds in this plot here to plant our greens on. Now I normally am not a big fan of making those elevated beds and using those simply because they don't work with most of the crops I grow. They do work really well for greens, salad mixes, stuff like that, but we grow a lot more than just greens and salad around here. But in this particular plot, it's going to be necessary. As you can see here from the lay of the land, this plot is kind of on a downhill slope. And if we pan over here all the way around, you see my barn right there? So water runs off the side of that barn, and the runoff goes right along here, all the way down that slope there, and kind of down to the bottom of this garden plot here. So because I get some runoff down there, I need to elevate my planting surface so it doesn't wash out any of my crops should it come a decent sized rain after I plant this stuff. And I learned this lesson good last year when I planted some onions in here and I had a little washout at the bottom there. The onions were able to tolerate it pretty well, but I don't know if these greens will. So we're going to elevate these beds. We're going to build us up a little mound and plant on top of that. So I've already got my stakes in place so I can drive my wheel hoe in a straight line to help make these beds. Now I'm going to do these beds about 2 foot to 30 inches wide, and a lot of people like them 30 inches or 36, but it's just not very comfortable for me to straddle that wide of a bed, so I like them closer to 2 foot. So what I've done was every other spot where I'm going to run the wheel hoe, I've either put a mark in the soil, so there's a mark there, and then we'll drive to that stake down there, and then on that end there's a mark, and then we'll drive to this stake right here and back and forth. So the beds, I've got these lines or marks or stakes 3 feet apart, but by the time we rake them up and kind of mound them up, it'll be closer to 2 feet. Then I've got 3 feet between each bed just to give me some space to work here while I'm building the beds. So we're going to get 3 of these elevated beds in this plot right here. Then we're going to use our handy dandy wheel hoe here to help us build this bed. So I've got my double wheel hoe here, and instead of having 2 plow blades on it like we normally do, I've just got 1 blade on it because I want to throw dirt to the center of where that bed is going to be. So I just put 1 blade on there. You could do this with either blade. I just put this one on the right side because that's what's more comfortable for me, but if you're more of a left-handed person, you can put that left plow on there and take that right one off if you want to. So we're going to use the double wheel hoe, and we're going to run down these lines right here, kind of help mark off where our beds are going to be, and then we're going to come back and take our handy dandy garden rake there, and we're going to mound them up and level them off before we get our HOSS garden cedar and plant on top of them. All right. So we got our 3 elevated beds made there. Tiger, what you think about those elevated beds we just made? They look pretty, don't they? Now, if you had a big old plot and was doing this, you might would want you one of those fancy bed shapers that you can put behind a BCS or a tractor. But this little plot here, it didn't take too long, about 15-20 minutes and a little sweat equity, and we got them nicely made there. Now, the goal here is with these little valleys, when we do get a lot of water, a lot of rain or runoff from that barn, that water will wash down those valleys there and won't wash off or wash out our plants on the beds. And these beds ended up being, after I raked them up, they're about 2 foot wide, which would be nice, just wide enough to kind of straddle and go along and cut these greens. Now let's walk over here and take a look at our cedar and see what we're going to be planting today. So we're going to plant those beds with our HOSS garden cedar here, and the varieties we're going to plant, and this is some unofficial packaging. If you order these from our site, you'll get some nice labeling on there with germ rates and all that, but this is just something I put together as I was grabbing some of these to shoot this video this morning. So we've got all top turnip, which is a turnip that just grows top, no roots. And we've been really enjoying those. Miss HOSS planted some in her raised beds, and so we're going to plant a whole bed of those. And then we've got this tot soy green, which is kind of a rounded mustard green, and it's got a really good flavor to it. Grown it before in our premium greens mix, and I like it, so I'm going to plant a bed of it by itself. And then we've got this Mizuna green, which is more of kind of a frilly leaf mustard, and it's really good as well. It's a little milder than the tot soy, and the turnip is probably a little milder than both of those. So we'll get a nice little flavor profile, and we could eat these individually, or we can mix them together and have 3 nice beds of greens there. Now all 3 of these are what we call cut and come again type greens. So we plant them really thick on those beds there, and we cut them kind of small once they get up 5 or 6 inches or so, and they'll keep growing back, and we can cut them 3, 4, 5, sometimes even 6 times. So they'll grow all throughout the winter, and we'll just keep cutting them and eating them. And so you get a lot of biomass, or a lot of harvest, from one bed of these guys. They're really, really productive. So the plate we're using today for our HOSS garden cedar is a modified number 1 plate. Now this is our stock number 1 plate. Comes with 8 holes, 19 inches divided by 8. That would give you a little over 2-inch spacing, but I want to plant them a little thicker than that. So I've got this plate here that I made several years ago, and I use it every year when I'm planting greens densely on a bed like this. What I did was I drilled out 8 more holes. So if you look on this stock plate here, you can see there's some little dibbles or indentions there between each hole that kind of give you a reference point. So I drilled those out, and I've got 16 holes in this plate, and that's going to give me a little over 1-inch spacing, so I can put them in there real thick. Now if this was our first time using this plate, what we do is we'd put it in the cedar there. I don't have the hopper on, it's right over there. And we put some seed in there and run it through there to make sure everything worked right. But like I said, I've used this plate many times before. I know it's going to work good for me, and so I don't need to test it. But I did put some seeds in those holes just to make sure they fit in there. If we pull this plate up, we can see our seeds there all fit nicely in the holes. Nice little ring there. So I know this plate's going to work good for me. Now all we got to do is put the hopper in there, put our seed plate in there, and pour some seed, and we'll be ready to plant. So we take our hopper here, and make sure that hole in the hopper is lined up with that hole, the seed drop tube there. We're going to take our seed plate, put it in there, make sure it's sitting on that little D-ring, sitting in there nice and snug. Then we've got our spacer cone that goes in there, and then finally our brush. It's going to sit in there in that little groove, and we'll take our wing nut, put it on there, and we just want to tighten this right until it touches the top of that plate on the brush. Don't want to over tighten it, because that'll put stress on the wheel and the gears and everything. So barely tighten that. That's why we put that do not over tighten sticker on there. And a couple more things. When I'm planting these greens thick like this, I like to tie up the kickstand. That way the kickstand's not digging in where I've already planted. Usually that's not an issue because you're planting stuff further apart than this. But on these guys, I'm going to plant them what I call wheel to wheel. So I'm going to use this wheel as an indicator, the track of the wheel where I planted, and I'll plant right beside that, rows really close together, about 1 to 2 inches apart on the rows. So I tie up that kickstand so it doesn't mess with any of the seeds that I've already planted. And then I've got Tiger. I'm trying to shoot a video here and you're over there playing with something. And then we've got our depth here set at 1/4 inch. So when that first little notch there is level with that garden cedar frame, that gives us 1/4 inch depth, and that's what we want to plant these greens on. So we're doing all top turnip on the first bed, so I'm going to pour me some seeds in here. And I don't like to fill it all the way up. I just like to put a few in there to start with, make sure everything's going to work right. And so I just fill it up kind of to the top of where the seed plate sits. And we're going to fit as many rows as we can on these beds we just made. Alright, so we were able to get about 5 or 6 rows there of our all-top turnip. Now we want to empty these extra seeds out here. Tiger, watch out. And pour our Mizuna in there. So I just take the wing nut off, and then I'm going to use my thumb. I'm going to hold it over the brush and everything. Let me get my bag opened up here. I'm going to just pull this whole piece off here, and I'm going to dump the excess seeds in that bag there. And one thing people always ask is they wonder their seeder's working right, because they say there's seeds stuck in their brush. Well, that means the brush is doing its job. Seeds are supposed to get stuck in the brush. The brush's job is to catch any excess seed in that seed plate, so you only get one seed per hole dropping at a time. So if you've got seeds in your brush, that means the brush is doing its job. So we just flick those excess seeds from that brush to our bag here. Pour the rest of those in our bag. And we'll put everything back on here. Our cone. Our brush. Wing nut. And we'll pour some of this Mizuna in here that we're going to plant on the next bed. And now the topsoil. And there it is. 3 beds planted with our HOSS garden seeder. A bed of all top turnips, Mizuna greens, and tatsoi greens. Now the nice thing about that seeder is, because it's made out of steel and weighs about 35 pounds, is it's nice and steady and stable. So we can walk to the side of those beds, not walk on the beds, and plant in a straight line. And because it's got a little weight to it, it packs down that seed in that soil really nicely. You can see those wheel tracks there. So we get some really good seed to soil contact. So we'll get really good germination there. So now I'll just take my tripod sprinkler, put some overhead water on these guys, get those beds nice and soaked. Should have some pretty quick germination in just 2 or 3 days or so. Our temps have warmed up some. The cool front has moved on past us, and we're in the high 60s, maybe even hit 70 this week before Thanksgiving. So some nice warmer soil temps for good germination. I don't use drip irrigation when I'm doing these densely planted beds, just because I can't get enough drip tape lines in there to keep it adequately watered evenly. So we just use overhead irrigation, and it works really good that way. The maturity date on most of these greens is probably 25 to 35 days, so it won't be long at all, just a few weeks before we'll be cutting our first mess of greens off these beds. And like I mentioned earlier, we can cut these things over and over again, so we'll be eating off these greens on until next year. We'll cut them 4, 5, or 6 times. We'll cut them every 2 or 3 weeks or so once they start growing back, make new vegetation, and it's just a great source of food in your garden. Growing these densely planted beds, you get a lot of food off just a little bit of space. I'll put some links below to any of the products we used in this video, the wheel hoe, our garden seeder, and the seed varieties we planted. If you enjoyed this video, give us a big like, give us a big thumbs up, give us a big share, and we'll see you guys next time.